So this is Sahara TV talking to Brian Kagoro about the Pan-African Congress, the 8th Pan-African Congress happening right now in Accra. Brian, it's very important to ask you, why did it take so long for the Pan-African movement to converge since 1994?
I think several factors. Resolutions were reached in 1994 that Libya would host it in 1998. Libya went through several challenges, internal contradictions relating to race relations, and then later sanctions, and then, of course, what finally happened. And Libya, at the time, was very keen that the venue not be shifted. Libya also got preoccupied with the work it was doing, the wonderful work it was doing in trying to strengthen the African Union, which was formed after the 1994 Congress. And also the Secretariat did not have independent source of financing and a consistent secretariat employing the highest caliber of staff. And the Ugandan government generously gave some stipend, but it was insufficient for the global work that you need a Pan-African movement secretariat to do. But there were also other factors. The movement's relationship with states and the role of states within the movement became a challenge. Some sectors of the Pan-African movement disengaged and, of course, concentrated on forming organizations within civil society and elsewhere that saw themselves as oppositional to the state and not necessarily as potential allies with African states in contesting globalization, neoliberalism, or neo-imperialism. Yeah.
Are you suggesting that this Pan-African movement will be working with states as opposed to putting states in check?
It has to do both. With respect to Africa's posture and relationship with the rest of the world, which is largely an intergovernmental relationship, it needs to be buttressed by a very robust set of people-to-people relations within Africa and African peoples with other peoples of the global South. And in particular, our starting point is the global Pan-African family. Those Afro-descendants or descendants of Africans who are in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in North Africa, in Scandinavia, Asia Pacific, in Europe. And these are our greatest allies. Some of them have done very well within commerce and industry. They've done well in their professions. They are a source of both resources, information, expertise, and we need to create the structure and the framework so that we're able to use, no matter where you locate them, African intelligence, African capacities. But the real issue for this movement, as you know, is that without a strong social movement, without a strong grassroots movement, our own governments become hostage to interests that pay their bills.
For people who are just growing up, let's say people who are in their 20s now, they probably never heard about Pan-African movement because even African history is no longer taught in schools in places like Nigeria. What are you going to do to bring in, the X generation or Generation X, as they call them, internet savvy, tech savvy, tech crazy generation, to understand that this is not just some Che Guevara thing?
I think that there are 2 or 3 dimensions of this struggle. There's the struggle that contests or opposes forms of oppression, of deprivation, or dehumanization. Black people, wherever you find them, still are at the bottom of the social ladder. Even the few capitalists, the few well-endowed entrepreneurs are just a small speck. The bulk of our people wallow in poverty. So there is a resonance with the message of Pan-Africanism. But what does it say? That the solution to your problems do not lie entirely within your locale, which is there's a very subjective, I am in village Y or in township B, and all my problems therefore pertain to that. Everything else that happens outside doesn't matter. For example, how we extract our natural resources is a matter of global policy, right? And global power by those multinationals that are everywhere. So the oppression, the extraction that you see on the west coast of Africa that has decimated fish stock, the extraction that you see on the east coast of Africa, the extraction you see in the center, in the hinterlands where oil extraction, gold extraction, copper extraction has left holes in the ground, and also pollution and other forms of, is the same. What has not happened previously is allowing every person who lives in a mining community in Sierra Leone to realize that their struggle is not different from their colleagues in Venezuela, in Brazil and prior, or in Colombia, right? Allowing, and that their emancipation lies in the solidarity, which is you share common struggle, but also common solutions. You learn from each other. At the moment, we are largely and hugely and almost solely dependent on Western intelligence, on Western resources, on Western ideas, to emancipate ourselves, so that what now exists in place of the Pan-African movement is an NGO industry that depends on projectized support, and there may be a space for that. But the second thing, the second plane, is ideas. Today, we live in the moment of Pan-Africanism. People listen to Nigerian music across this continent, watch Nigerian films. People watch South African TV. People read Senegalese and other newspapers, because media has enabled us, and the culture and the arts and sport. We all have Thierry Henry, we have Didier Drogba as our heroes, because we see them looking like us. So you see little kids who support English soccer, Spanish soccer, and so on and so forth. They see their heroes as those black people who are opening frontiers elsewhere. But it is that sense that you need to vest in them the pride and self-belief that says you do not need to necessarily go out there. If our own governments invested as much in sports, in arts, in culture, in the media, as we do in stealing and buying brand new grand Mercedes-Benz and Rolls-Royce Phantoms, what we could actually have is a revolution. China dominated us first by making us watch Chinese movies. We watched Kung Fu, so we became captive to it. So if you don't culturally project yourself, it is doubtful that you can economically project yourself, because there must be a self-belief in a people that allows you to say, I'm not competing as accepted in the dominant, I'm competing as capable in my own environment. I think it's useful. The third and last frontier, so you have ideas, you have also there's a third and last frontier, is ultimately good politics is insufficient without good Pan-African economics. And what might that economics be? At the moment, we have swaths of unemployed graduates, engineers, mathematicians, you name it, in one part of the continent. And yet we have numeracy and literacy challenges in another. And our solution is to go to Europe and bring teachers who perhaps may not know necessarily as much. Why? Because we have not opened up our borders to allow for this common African citizenship. Today, women that cross borders to trade are greater victims of brutality, of violence, than backpackers who come to pirate and patent our indigenous knowledges and crafts. So there is a problem around priority and understanding. And this is where we need power, because the tragedy in our moment is that those who have power have no ideas. Those who have ideas have no power. So Pan-Africanism is suggesting that there be a partnership between power which is amongst the people, and the ideas to transform the continent. I don't think we need to borrow. We have three things that I think we've always said in the Pan-African movement. Let's diversify who we depend upon for knowledge. Let's learn from our colleagues in the East, in the South. Let's not just learn from the imperial North, the West. Number two, let's domesticate things that work. So if there are things that have worked in Brazil, let's see if we can domesticate it. Number three, let's indigenize our own knowledge. Because in Pan-Africanism, we accept this fact that every global idea was once a local idea, whether it's an aeroplane and stuff. And that's why I think that it is not just teaching history, but it is teaching national wisdom. Because now what we need are not just courses in history. History is very important. We need courses in national wisdom. That says investing in the arts is not getting more entertainers. Investing in the arts is business. The wealthiest black persons that we know and most prominent, whether it's Oprah Winfrey, Jay-Z, or Co., do the arts. Why? Because they have an industry that allows them to flourish. And they employ other people. And they globally determine what people hear, what people think, what people say.
Well, do you think Africa is going to see the kind of Pan-Africanism that Ghana had in the days of, again, if we continue in this trajectory, is there anything that's going to be done to make a difference in making sure Pan-Africanism is as popular and as acceptable and has the same kind of integrity it had, during the struggle for independence, before and immediately after?
I think that it is possible if we invest in something else that I didn't do. Leadership, developing a cadre of leaders who are conscious of this fact. Pan-Africanism is not an engrafted add-on. Pan-Africanism is a way of life, it's a consciousness. So in our leadership schools, leadership training schools, we're not yet investing in training public leaders, public sector and private sector leaders who have a Pan-African consciousness. That integrity comes from consciousness. That integrity comes from solidarity and exposure. The biggest challenge we face today is that our people are not permitted to. And because of lack of resources and lack of infrastructure that joins us, we don't interact enough. We hold these myths about each other and we don't understand each other. We could understand each other much better. And this is what, when I referred to music and film, when I referred to arts and culture. I mean, I grew up, I read Shoinka, I read Chinua Achebe, I read Ngugi wa Thiong'o. This is what we were being instructed. And the literary giants of this moment, the film giants of this moment, the sporting giants of this moment need to be conscious that they carry a responsibility. But the leadership we have is a class that has betrayed not only itself, but betrayed the future of Africa because of its commitment to one thing: stomach infrastructure, momentary gratification, and those sort of things. So, but you will not change it purely by insisting that we need a different leadership. You have to have a process of ensuring you produce it and also you hold it to account. And it seems to me, though, and this is where Pan-African leadership in civil society, Pan-African leadership in the churches. Today, the greatest danger of consciousness is that in the faith sector, we have an anti-Pan-African, pseudo-American culture that has grown. They listen to music that is not our own. They are ashamed to be part, as though there is something criminal about being a faith person and being authentic, right? And this is part of the challenge. So in growing this leadership, going to Nkrumah and beyond, those of us who've been in this movement need a humility that says we don't know everything. There are new forms of expression of Pan-Africanism amongst the youth that may be different from. We were not on Twitter. We were not on Facebook, right? We wanted longer characters that were more structural, that were more analytical. Could it be, even as people do limited characters, that there is a consciousness in the use of those instruments and platforms? And I think it's a give and take. There needs to be that intergenerational dialogue that says, look, it is not just about age, it is also about the instruments through which we spread this, and the infrastructure and the mechanisms. The last thing is that even our thieves have become Pan-African. People looting our states more and more because of the global economic crisis are now investing in Africa. Some now call themselves fancy names. But the beauty is, if thieves have become Pan-African, we now need more good people who are Pan-Africanist in orientation. Yeah.
Wow, that's a very good one. Thank you so much for coming on our show.